Hi, Matt. Welcome to the show. I am beyond excited for our conversation. What a pleasure it is to have you.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, we were chatting before you hit record that I think we've been talking since at least 2019-ish and went through a lot of the same journeys, we could call them, of learning and unlearning different health protocols and information and yeah, just being open to changing our mind, right, based on new information.
Yeah, no, it is true. And, we're largely here to talk about some of that today. And I realize too, I just want to start out by saying that I realize that, this audience is so mixed. I mean, we probably have people of all kinds that are going to be listening to this show. And so while some people might not be privy of your journey and all the things that, because some people might know about a lot of the controversy and all that, and some might have no idea. So I think between the two of us, we'll be able to sort of catch people up and enlighten them to the best of our abilities. So before we get into really all of the good stuff, why don't you give us a little bit of backstory on you, how you got into health, Mitolife Radio, all the things.
Sure. Yeah, so give the summary here.
Yeah.
So back around it was 2005. I started, thanks to my Aikido sensei in high school, started watching documentaries. And the initial one was Zeitgeist. And that woke a lot of people up to the Federal Reserve and the way that the world runs. And that was one of the first, conspiracy documentaries that kind of shook things up. And it also talked about religion, and I was raised Catholic, so it kind of went through like multiple things of questioning reality, and that just set me on a search for knowledge. And I ended up getting into a channel called Project Camelot, which was really instrumental in my journey, which went into extraterrestrial stuff and MK Ultra and just Montauk Project, like Black Project, basically stuff, government whistleblower stuff. And it went down a rabbit hole for like 4 years of that, actually, just digging and digging, and got into George Norrie, Coast to Coast, of course, and just, you know, listening in the background. And because I had paranormal experiences growing up, I had a really weird childhood of seeing and hearing stuff and just peeking into other dimensions, you could say. And then it was in 2010 I found a YouTube channel called Life Regenerator with Dan McDonald, and he was at a nudist park in Washington in front of his RV. You know, he was clothed, but he was shirtless with a table, and he was juicing vegetable juice. So, green juice, and talking about healing disease and reaching your highest potential and helping others and being of service. And I was just so inspired by him that uh, previously, for years, I was like an unhealthy vegetarian, like Subway, and like a cheese and breaditarian, pretty much, with you know soy cheese and just tons of fake products. And pretty much overnight, I went raw vegan from an unhealthy vegetarian to, so I kind of skipped the unhealthy vegan phase. I just went straight from unhealthy vegetarian straight to almost 100% raw vegan, which is a big shift. And my skin cleared up for the first time. I started having acne in junior high school. I had eczema my whole life. So I would itch the inner part of my arm until it bled. And growing up in San Diego, kind of your general area, we had a lot of aloe vera in the backyard. And so my mom raised me on homeopathy, and aloe vera were the two main things that she utilized in her toolkit for health. And she cut off the aloe leaf, we'd scrape it off, and I just rub the raw aloe on my eczema, and it was so soothing, and I'd be able to sleep. But then once I learned about nutrition and even just raw vegan, I mean, I was still getting more enzymes than I'd ever gotten in my life because I was eating just tons of cooked food. And there is something to that with raw food, of the enzymes. That's a real thing. And I started juicing several times a week, like celery, carrot, cucumber, habanero, even apple, I mean, everything, fennel. I would just make these crazy concoctions, and skin got better. My mind got clearer. I feel like my IQ was literally going up, even though people would say, oh, there's no fat soluble vitamins, there's no protein. That was still a massive upgrade from standard American with the raw vegan thing. It definitely is still an upgrade from the processed food way of life. So I think it only took a couple years, and I was already researching water and light and EMFs, and got into grounding. Like pretty much that same year I went raw vegan, I was already putting a rod underneath my house in the basement to a grounding sheet. So I've been grounding for 14 years while I sleep, off and on. And I was also getting into superfoods. I learned about all the raw vegan gurus. I was making my own superfood chocolate and putting Shilajit in there in like 2011, and like eating a ton of chocolate, uh, and making superfood elixirs and Makuna and Bacopa and ashwagandha. And I was into all that stuff way back then. And then I think it was around 2013, I discovered healthy meat. So on YouTube, I found some channels that were transitioned raw vegans, and they said, hey guys, there's actually humane, there's, yeah, you saw the Earthlings documentary, but did you know there's actually farms that don't do the CAFO thing, that, grass fed, that, free range chicken, you can have your own chickens. You do it however, there's multiple different ways to do it. So I started eating grass fed beef and bison, and I really rocked the boat in my little friend circle where I lost friends over it. But I started seeing my strength go up, where I was kind of weak my whole life. And then all of a sudden I'm at a friend's house, and I have the ab roller there. I'm like, hey guys, let's see who can do a standing one. And I go and do a standing one, nose to ground, at the ab roller, and stand back up. And then my bodybuilder friends, both of them that have been lifting for 10 years, couldn't do one. And I was like, maybe that pound of grass-fed beef I just ate was good for me. If I could do that, and I couldn't do that my whole life without any training, like I'm just immediate instant strength. And so that really woke me up to the power of animal foods, and the ethics of it. I went back and forth, I think, with eating meat and vegetarian like 4, 5, 6 times, just because I don't want to harm another sentient being. And to me, ideally, we wouldn't need any nutrition, like kind of like a breatharian thing, or living on sunlight or electrons from the earth. But that's not where we're at right now. So we need sustenance. And for me personally, I know that I need meat consistently, both fish and red meat. And so that was the biggest part of my journey. And then around that time, I was getting into supplements, because I knew that vegans had deficiencies. And so I was getting into all the nuances of filling in the gaps. What am I not getting whenever I'm in my vegetarian phase or my vegan phase? And so I went into like every vitamin, mineral, nutrient researching, carotenoids and flavonoids, and just all these different things that can help to balance out these extreme ways of living. And what I learned a lot of the time is it's absolutely possible to live like on an extreme diet if you're supplementing, but then you're relying on supplements and monetarily. And then if grid goes down and society collapses, it's like, what are you going to do? you have to switch it up, right?
Yeah.
You can't get your essential amino acid powder or whatever that you need. So, I spent time at a supplement store called Sprouts. My friend Garrett worked there, and we would just hang out. I would go in there for hours and just listen to customer conversations that they would have, and spend hours going down the aisles, picking up bottles. And a lot of that was what inspired me to start Mitolife, because I just saw a lot of companies were going through the motions, not a lot of innovation, a lot of just poor excipients, just cutting corners. At some point I started asking you know, what about all this plastic? And are there any companies doing biodegradable bottles? And no. And so I started doing that with Mitolife and just trying to upgrade things. And not to make this go on forever, but at some point I got obsessed with omega-3 fatty acids. And so that was like a milestone, pivotal point in my journey where I got into the quantum health thing. And I believe this was around like 2017, 2018-ish range, where I got into, DHA is basically an acceptor of electrons. It makes us more of a solar panel for the sun. We get more out of the sunlight, out of naked sunbathing. And so I started doing that when I was renting an RV from my friends pretty close to Tijuana in their backyard. And I grounded the whole RV to the earth with a rod. I grounded a chest freezer. I put lodestones in the chest freezer. I was doing cold soaks. Ideally, my sweet spot was 55 to 57 degrees Fahrenheit. A lot of people like to go colder. For me, that was perfect, and I got all the benefits I needed. And I think looking back, it's probably not as stressful as all the people like machismo. The lower, the better. I do 32 Fahrenheit or sub 30 Fahrenheit. The lower you go in temperature, probably the more stressful it is with the adrenaline increase. And
Yes.
but I do think there's a time and a place for that. I think for some people it could be super helpful. And so did that while naked sunbathing at Solar Noon. I was slamming algae oil at the time because I thought it was cleaner than fish because of microplastics, parasites, mercury. Like there has to be something better than seafood to get our essential fatty acid, omega-3 DHA. And so I found this Schizochytrium microalgae species, which now is super trending in the health community and just so popular. It blew up. Now, it's like vegan DHA, and you can find it in capsules. I think even Nordic Naturals sells it now, or in liquid. Several companies sell it. It's even in the Qualia supplement. And that's all grown in China. It's biotech stuff. It's grown in giant vats. It's a very profitable industry because it just grows so quickly. And I was at the time taking, 2017, 2018, I was taking 4 grams a day, probably minimum of that, 4,000 milligrams, up to 30 grams as a shot. So I believed in it so much, I would just pour it in a shot glass and just down it. And then after I partnered with a guy, that's a whole documentary. I basically gave a guy half of my business. It was kind of like a rookie mistake, learning experience, first business. Mr. Money and Connections comes in and he's saying he knows all the right people. He has the money and let's blow this thing up. And I was seduced by that because I wanted to help more people and gave him half the company within 2 weeks of knowing this guy. So within 2 weeks, he pushed me to give him 50% ownership. And that ended up being a wild ride that ended up in me. Well, near the end of it, I was looking at Adam Bergstrom's stuff. And I wasn't talking to Adam Bergstrom at the time, but I was reading his posts and I'd known about him for years. And I thought he was, his omega-3 stuff was quack stuff. And, oh, that's conspiracy nonsense. But I started to read his material on yellow fat disease and lipofuscin. And I went to my business partner at the time and I said, hey, maybe we should look into this because I don't want to harm people. I don't want to sell something that has any potential to cause harm to people, even if it's over time, because it doesn't cause harm. It actually has a benefit immediately because it's like a partially immunosuppressive, almost like a chemotherapy effect. But long term, age spots, lipofuscin, neurodegeneration. And he was not into it at all. He's like, oh, no, or let's look into it later. Or I'll look into it later. Just kind of brushed it off. And so I just started to see dollar signs in his eyes, and that was the focus, and growing the business just to sell it, which is not my intention with Mitolife. And so I started to disconnect from him. We were living together, so I moved out to Idlewild, and then shortly thereafter, there was kind of like a spiritual demonic attack that occurred that ended, started a lawsuit that went for 4 months, and basically we split, and I walked away with some cash from it. He got the business, and I could have walked away with no cash and took the business down and destroyed it. And that was a thought in my brain, total possibility. But the higher thought to me was, oh, let him take it and, get celebrities on it and whatever he wants to do. But I'm going to take my money to restart Mitolife and kind of raise it to a higher level and get back to helping people, which was my original intention. And so that was the decision that I made. And I was able to restart Mitolife kind of brand new. And the flagship products were enzymes. So it was systemic enzymes, dissolve it all. It was digestive enzymes, lactase enzyme, dairy absorb. Then I just grew it from there. So from my previous experience with veganism and specifically DHA, vitamin E was a big focus because that prevents lipofuscin accumulation, and it's amazing for staving off neurodegeneration. So I kind of felt like it was my duty to share the good word of vitamin E after what I was promoting for so many years, which was the DHA algae oil. So yeah, that was kind of the saga, and it keeps going from there. But I'm gonna let you talk.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Well, and I think here's the beauty of the fact that you just sort of went through, like in summary, a lot of the little slots on the timeline is that, which is largely going to set us up for what we're going to talk about, is evolving. You have not stayed stagnant during your journey at all. And I feel like, that's of course true with a lot of people, but I also sometimes feel like people sort of do in a way stay stagnant because they get caught up in the fact that, it's got to be this way and health is black and white and there can be no change and science is science and science doesn't change either. And, and not only have you been super open-minded in that regard, but also just your journey. You made a comment about how veganism and being raw was certainly a step up from where you were before with the processed food. That is such an amazing example because if you think about it, like, yeah, it might not be ideal, at least ideal for most people is probably the thought process, but in a way you still got a lot of benefit. And that was a stepping stone for you to sort of evolve through not only nutrition, but like your health and learning about the body in general, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's something to be said of short term versus long term. And you could say that for ketosis or the carnivore diet or the raw vegan diet or whatever it is. Like if you want to try something for a week or 3 months or 6 months, I don't think it's going to change much. I mean, you'll probably feel better just because you're making a change and you're probably cutting things out. But I think just the learning process alone could be extremely healing, even if it's not so much about the protocol itself or the diet of what you're doing, just what you learn through that experience of trying something new.
That's so well said, because if you think about it, people think that there's this end point. I talk about that a lot on the show too. People think there's this end point. Like once I get here, which I've had to learn that as well. Once I get here, I'll be good. And it's like, sometimes it's really not about that. It's really about like the journey through it and all of the lessons. And oh my gosh, I say this with all of my heart and soul. The more that I learn, the less that I feel like I know, right? Don't you feel like that
Mhm.
as well? Because it's cool because, I have also kind of come from, I don't want to say I was super dogmatic with everything, but there were definitely things, within the health space and in the health circles. We're going to talk about this, where I was fairly like, okay, this is really how it is, and, no, in fact, that's just not it. It's never going to be a one size fits all approach. And I think through your journey, you have always sort of had that where it's like, okay, it's probably not a one size fits all approach. Although, and we will touch on this, for a while, you kind of did think that way,
Yeah.
especially I would say a couple years ago. So we're going to touch on that for sure. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about it for a second. What do you have to say about health? And I should say, largely this requires talking about social media also. But what do you have to say about people in the health space now? Like, what are you seeing? Like, are you still? Do you feel like it's super dogmatic in terms of how people are approaching health, in terms of other people that are out there practicing? What are your thoughts just about, like, is it as extreme as some of us think it is? Like, what? Just give us your thoughts in whatever way you want to go.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I follow some accounts loosely, whether on Instagram or X, formerly Twitter, and just trying to keep my finger on the pulse of what's trendy.
Mm.
And what I've noticed is the repeat stuff, and I really respect and appreciate him for what he shared. It. He was a true legend. But a lot of people treat his quotes like they're scripture, from the Bible. And I think he wouldn't have wanted that. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Where, if Ray said it, then it's true. And, he was probably wrong about some stuff. And that's just because we're human. And so yeah, I've noticed that really that's still very much trending with his information. I mean, even Dr. Mercola kind of renounced ketosis, and he's on that. Dave Asprey is on 300 grams of carbs plus a day. As far as I know, Ben Greenfield hasn't changed soon, but I think he's next. Obviously, Saladino. There's a whole list of people that transitioned from low carb to like very high carb, in fact, probably due to my information and Ray Pete's information, which it was around 2020 that I started interviewing people because I had a decent following. So I interviewed a really old school guy in that community named Josh Rubin around 2020, and he kept coming to me for lives. So he would message me and say, "Hey, when are we going to do another live?" Because he wanted to really get this information blown up. And I believe between the two of us, I did accelerate the kind of repeat message substantially then. So that information I've been seeing a lot. I would say that's the most of it. And then as we were talking about before we hit record, the homestead kind of trad life message is very popular. And as someone that's been 100% off grid for 4 years, it's blood, sweat, and tears. And it's something that is not for everybody, as we were talking about. I don't think everybody has to homestead. Everybody doesn't have to have cows or even chickens or even a garden. If you want to be a city dweller in an apartment or a condo or a townhouse or whatever it is, that's fine. I think that's if people are happy with that lifestyle. I don't think there's this idealistic way that everyone should live. And I've been spending quite a bit of time researching artificial intelligence for fun because it's just fascinating to me. And I was listening to an interview this morning on the Lex Friedman podcast, and the guy was just talking about all of the things that AGI, artificial general intelligence, will be able to do, like even talk to animals, decipher dog barks and cat meows. And I mean, if they're going to get smarter than we are, it's going to reach a really insane level. And where I'm really most interested in the AI stuff is with the PubMed deciphering, the clinical studies, because right now that's where we're at with social media. It's how many big words do you know? Oh, he knows what he's talking about. He can string together big words. He can describe, chemistry and biology and sound smart. And so that's a credible influencer. But in my mind, anyone, can read from a teleprompter, maybe not Joe Biden, but, anyone in the health community could have their notes and stuff. And I think that's a lot of what happens when AI comes around and is able to break down everything and just instantly look at 20,000 studies and decipher it. And you can ask it any question you want. I really think the whole influencer thing is going to go away as far as the health community, and it's going to become completely obsolete. And I really don't know what it's going to look like after that, but I'm excited for it to get there because I just think it's just a disaster as it currently is, of just confusion of, uh, fear this supplement, or, don't take this supplement, or, the one size fit all approach, or uh, I think social media is mostly causing confusion and fear in people. And
Yes.
so I'm hoping that once the AI system, and I'm talking way beyond Chat GPT, and it's going to totally challenge the pharmaceutical industry, if we get there soon, because then it's like, what dosage of what supplements do I need to take to cure my X, Y, and Z? And it's like, here it is.
Yeah.
It'll take this long probably. And uh,
It's wild. It's wild to think about it. It's wild to think about it that we're living in this time. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like when we were younger, it just didn't seem like we would be where we are. I don't know if you feel that way, but I
uh-huh.
certainly feel
Yep.
that way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
And you're so right. It's so noisy. And I think that I feel like it's been a very it's been a big goal of mine here on this show to be solution driven and to give people options in a way that doesn't feel super overwhelming. And the more, again, the more I interview, the more I realize that it's not a one size fits all. It's just not. No matter who you are, you're going to have a different story. And if somebody is promoting that it is only this way and it's going to only be this way for the remainder of time, then you better run in the other direction, because it's just not that. It doesn't matter how good it sounds or it seems, right? And chances are they're probably selling something too, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think we're going to go into iron, because
Yep.
that was my big,
That's where I'm headed.
that, that was the big thing for me. And I noticed that trend, which I was responsible for amplifying it once again. And it was that everybody is either iron overloaded and or iron dysregulated. And some people are like, no, I'm not saying everyone has iron overload, but everybody has iron dysregulation. Even that is false, in my opinion. And that's another one size fit all. So yeah, I was in that community, and I had probably 20 shows about it,
Mhm.
and more if you count how much I mentioned iron overload in my first probably 150 shows or so. And then I started to see Mercola talk about it, and very prominent figures in the health industry say everybody has too much iron, almost everybody, and make these like blanket statements. And then seeing all the women that have been harmed by that advice, specifically women, and find these Facebook groups like the Iron Protocol and Caitlin Hardigan, which I've had on a few times. And obviously, some women are severely iron deficient, and they need to supplement iron, and they definitely don't need to donate iron, which is the most dangerous thing, I think, that's touted with people with low ferritin. You have a ferritin of 8, go donate iron and you'll feel better. It's like, no, that could potentially kill the woman.
Yeah. 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 No, it's okay. Maybe we should back up a second, because let's set it up so that people who don't know
Yep.
can be a little bit more involved in where we're going. So, and I'm going to speak from my own personal experience too, because it ties in really well with yours. So I'm going to start with a question. So for those who are like, I don't really understand iron overload, like what, like I don't understand it. Like I've never heard the term, because there are going to be people that are in that camp here. Um, my question is that, can you just quickly summarize what iron overload is, and how it's not something that's completely negated, like off the face of the earth? This is something that does occur. But back in, I would say probably 2020, 2021, that was probably the heaviest time, I would say, where you were really like, you had that extreme approach. And I'm going to say extreme because it was, right? You've admitted that. You very
Yeah.
much admitted that.
Oh yeah.
And you were in this camp of like black and white. This is how it is as well. And there were a lot of guests few in particular who were guests on your show who were giving information. And at the time, it was information that you felt like was extremely credible, and it was the road, the way. So let's start out with, what is iron overload in a simplified term?
Yeah. So first of all, iron itself is an essential nutrient. And one of the guests that I had on that made this concept popular called it the dumb waiter that carries oxygen. So it'd be like, one of the top nutrients in your body, and you're dissing it, and you're just saying, oh, it's a stupid nutrient. It's not intelligent at all. It's super intelligent. It's essential. We die if we didn't have iron to carry oxygen throughout our body. And the message further from that goes that it needs nutrients to do its job properly, and one of those nutrients is copper, and also vitamin A or retinol. And those two together, you have a protein called ceruloplasmin, and you need ceruloplasmin to regulate iron. And by regulate, I mean that put it in the right place where it's supposed to go. Bone marrow, it's not supposed to go in large amounts in your liver, in your heart, certain compartments of the body, in your quote unquote tissues. It's supposed to be stored in very specific areas. And so if you get an iron test, and I actually peeked at my dad's just yearly checkup last year, and it only showed serum iron, which is a pretty useless marker. And most of the people's yearly checkup markers are useless. It's a very crappy test. It tells you almost nothing about your health. The Oligo scan would be a million times better, or something like that, or even an HTMA or this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so serum ferritin is way better. And that is, along with vitamin D, 25D is one of the best tests you can get, like once a year or something, even every couple years. And you could just quickly see if your ferritin is below 80, single digits, or 600, 700, 800. If it's super low or super high, that is such an easy starting point for your health. Because if it's super high, okay, let me check if I'm inflamed, because it's a marker of inflammation potentially if you are inflamed. Not everybody is. And so let's look at CRP. Let's look at HSCRP. Let's look at our inflammatory markers, and you just have a direction to go versus like shotgun approach, taking a million supplements and trying to figure it out. Testing can absolutely save you tons of time and money in that regard. So getting back to the iron overload, the message is that if your ferritin is either low or high, which doesn't make any sense, then you have excess iron in your tissues that's quote unquote stuck. And the way that you get it unstuck, or moving out of your tissues and in circulation, the message is it's supposed to be circulating throughout your body all the time, recycling. Then we get into nutrient deficiencies like vitamin A, like copper. There's even amino acids like L-lysine. There's B vitamins, specifically like B12, I believe B9. So, and I appreciate that approach. And there is something to, it's not that simple, because our body's very complex and things are usually complicated, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so where I'm at though with it is, there's different, and I've learned this from Caitlin Hardigan. So there's different stages of iron deficiency, because what I was taught in that, I'll call it a cult, or that religion of iron overload religion, I was taught that there's only, anemia, or, or iron deficient is synonymous with anemia. And that was kind of a programming that I had to break and learn from the man that they quote a lot, Robert Crichton, from the man himself, their source himself, that there are three stages. There's several stages of iron deficiency. And once you get to the anemia stage, you've already gone through the first two. And so you could even have normal hemoglobin. And, if you have normal hemoglobin, you go to Red Cross or wherever to donate blood, they will let you donate blood. But just because you have normal hemoglobin doesn't mean that you have enough iron. And I'm talking about have enough iron in the bone marrow, like actual iron deficiency. And me personally, I grew up not eating red meat. The first 30 years of my life, I mean, yeah, I had stages, as I mentioned, back in 2013, but then I went back and forth, vegan and vegetarian, a lot. And so I only had a handful of years in there that I was going hard on the red meat. Otherwise, I'd say 80% of my life, I didn't eat. It was white meat. It was cheese. And I didn't get a lot of iron because iron is concentrated in beef and elk and deer and steak, ground beef, those sorts of things, animal foods. And so as a man, you can also have iron deficiency if you have a history of veganism or vegetarianism. And I believe that's what happened to me. And I donated blood twice. First time I felt awesome. And that's probably because I was mobilizing iron that was like stuck maybe in my liver, which can happen. Uh-huh. So I think it can be hugely beneficial for a lot, but specifically with people with hereditary hemochromatosis, which is what Robert Crichton talks about as, really the case for true iron overload, is if you have a genetic predisposition to storing excess iron in your body, which that is a thing, but it is absolutely genetic. And those are kind of the things that I went through. And then I donated blood a second time, I think like a year apart, and it destroyed me. I felt so fatigued. I remember the drive home, I was thinking, am I going to fall asleep? And I took a nap on my plasma device when I got home, and I just felt like I'd run a marathon, and I was fatigued for the next probably 3 to 6 months. And it took me a long time to regain my energy and strength. And I couldn't work out for months. And then I found Caitlin and the Iron Protocol and started to pick her brain and have her on the show, and learned, oh, wow, people actually can be iron deficient. And you can't recycle iron if there's no iron to recycle, which they never talk about.
That was going to actually be a statement of mine. You took it though. You took it. Yeah. That was largely something that I learned through the last, I would say, year, of my life. But I want to chime in really quick and just say that you made a really good point. And I really want to highlight it for people. No matter how proficient they are in this language of iron deficiency, anemia. I think a lot of women listening are probably, and men too, but I mean, there's it's a lot of talk among women who have had issues with their iron. They're told they're anemic, etc. The thing that I learned the most was the difference between you can be iron deficient and it is not synonymous. Like the anemia is totally different, but but there's different stages. Isn't there like 4 different stages? You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. I think I said 3, but I think the 4th is anemia, and the first 3, all the other markers will just, because there's the mean corpuscular volume, and there's all these like 3 or 4 letter acronyms of basically the red blood cell shape and size and stuff like that, and all that could be out of whack before even hemoglobin lowers.
Yeah. And I want to just share for our friends that don't know, I know that I have friends listening that are very much in the know of what I'm about to say, but I fell into the same camp as you did. And I know I told you off air when we were chatting, like, I'm not here to, like slam people and throw people under the bus, and neither are you, but what I ended up doing was going through the protocol that you are referring to. So I was very much, I studied through the protocol and the iron overload, and I learned a lot about that. And that was simultaneously while you were changing your thoughts and views about it, which threw me into a complete spin, right? Because I'm going, whoa, wait a second. Like I had to almost take some steps back off of social media. I finished, and I still was, I want to say, not super concrete on any one thing. It's almost like I had to stop completely and completely reset, because I felt like I was in a little bit of a state of cognitive dissonance, as I told you earlier. And I took some time and I really like thought about it, and thought about the fact that like there has to be nuance here. There has to be nuance here. And then I just kind of started to go into the whole like, well, why isn't serum, and you can touch on this now, why isn't serum ferritin like a good, why do they say it's not a good marker, right? Like I think that it makes sense that it is. And then when I heard Caitlin's show and I heard her speak on it, it just clicked in a way that made logical sense for me, that it wasn't this absolute, you're sitting in a box, there's no way out, like this is how it is. All of us are iron overloaded. All of us have been poisoned. Not to say that iron overload doesn't exist, because it does. But I think it is individual specific. So you can take it from here in terms of what you want to say about the serum ferritin marker, because I know you've got some thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I would just highly recommend for anyone that's still in that mindset to really purchase the books. Like I had the Robert Crichton textbooks, and that's one of the world iron experts that is referenced by that group. Yeah. And I don't think anybody in that group purchased his materials. And I'm talking about, it's like a college science textbook on the physiology of iron and going into just all the aspects of it. And he's very contradictory to what that group says, as far as, does everybody have iron overload? No, it is only people with hereditary hemochromatosis. And is ferritin an accurate marker? Yes, it is. And I posted verbatim his quotes on my social media several times. And it goes back to inflammation. So it's called an acute phase reactant. It's the technical fancy phrase of what serum ferritin is, which is a fancy way of saying that it reacts to inflammation, where if your inflammation goes up, your ferritin will go up with it. And that could be caused by a lot of things, right? Someone got, experimental thing the last 3 years, a jabby thing, or they got dental infection. I mean, that was my experience, where I didn't go to the dentist for 4 or 5 plus years, maybe even longer, maybe like a decade. And I had basically just cavities chilling, and I didn't need root canals, but I needed fillings, which I did like a year ago. And my C-reactive protein dropped significantly. And I used a website called Inside Tracker, which looked at like 43 markers or something. And just after getting my dental fillings and getting that treated, finally going to the dentist and getting those taken care of, my inflammation plummeted. But what was interesting was my ferritin did not change. And it was hovering around low 70s, and it stayed right there. So I think it went down maybe 2 points or something like that, which to me was another nail in the coffin for that philosophy, because if low 70s was high in some of their minds, then after getting my dental treatment and my HSCRP dropped to almost nothing, my ferritin should have dropped to, something that's healthy in their mind, which is maybe, I think ideal ferritin's under 20, I've heard them say. Yeah. So that was not the case with my own experience. So that's something, a little experiment you could try. And there's other inflammatory markers off the top of my head. I can't remember what they are right now, but highly sensitive CRP is one of the big ones. And see your inflammation and then correlate that with your ferritin and see what happens. See if you can lower your inflammation, maybe take curcumin or turmeric or anti-inflammatories or whatever, systemic enzymes, and lower your inflammation, then see if your ferritin changes. That's a fun little at-home experiment that you could do for it. And I would also encourage people too, and I think Caitlin has said this, just go by how you feel, because a lot of these online groups, they do the authoritarian thing, puff up their chest and I'm the authority and listen to me. And they just kind of distract you with all this razzle dazzle, big words, scientific concepts. And you're like, wait, but how do I feel? Am I fatigued all the time? Is experimenting with some iron bisglycinate on an empty stomach first thing in the morning once going to kill you? If you want to see if you get a huge energy surge and you feel like $1,000,000 like you've never felt in years, yeah, it's worth a try. It's not going to kill you taking iron once to have that experiment, right? And that supersedes all the big words, all the books. It's how you feel, and that gets discounted all the time on social media. And it's so important. I mean, if you're couch locked or you don't have the energy to work out, maybe it's time to start experimenting and drop the fear, because you're not going to likely kill yourself experimenting, especially short term with stuff.
It's so true. I think that fear, gosh, I probably say this at least once a show or once an episode, which is, I think that fear largely runs the show in people's lives. And it has with mine too, it has with mine too. I mean, there's definitely been stages in life where I've been like, wow, if I don't get this figured out, like I'm never going to live. I'm never going to, and I just feel like it's really important to assess sometimes mental health first as well. Not first, but you can do things simultaneously, like look at your thought patterns and look at, like, are you being super dogmatic in thought? Are you just really operating from a place of like, a very narrow road? And you made such a great point, which is we undervalue and underestimate self, like how we're feeling, like just how we're feeling. You could have like beautiful blood work. That still doesn't necessarily dictate that you're feeling amazing, right? So there's just so much nuance, and people are so different. And I think that that's really like the overarching thing. And I think with iron, and I wanted to point out something too. If someone's listening and if they're not really super, if they haven't like dove hard like we have into this arena, they're probably like, well, why is it such a big deal? Like, why? Like, I don't understand. Like, what is the big deal with iron? So you have too much iron. Well, there could be, I should say, and also the thought process behind the protocol, right? The iron overload and all of that is that could be harmful if someone really does have an iron overloaded situation, because they could have a lot of inflammation. That could be a disease state sort of precursor and stuff like that, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. It could absolutely increase the risk for pretty much every condition: diabetes, right, cancer, heart disease. And I wanted to say that about that protocol and that philosophy is that the information's not incorrect. It's just doesn't apply to everybody, which goes for everything, carnivore, vegan, whatever protocol. It's like, there's good stuff to take from everything. But I think the problem, and I think it's just human, whatever behavior, that we like to just latch on, and this person has to be 100% right, or this group has to be 100% right, or else we just drop it all. It's like, we can't be that all or nothing.
Right. No, okay. So here's how I view that is that I think you said the word human. And I think that the way that the average human works is that I think we operate out of a base of fear, but it's kind of disguised, because when we outsource our situation, right? Like our health, just, because we're talking about health, when we outsource our well-being, we then sort of put the responsibility on the outside of us. And it kind of then is a reliever. It kind of alleviates this. Okay. So it's on them, and it helps us, sort of move through with more, I don't know, less fear, more grace. When we're like, they're right. Because if they're right, then I don't have to worry. All I have to do is take what they give me and move forward, and I'm going to be okay. Right? That is the human condition. That is what we do as humans. And you've done it. I've done it. I'm sure a lot of people listening have done it. So I think, that what we're saying, friends, what Matt is saying is that like he said, this stuff is not incorrect. It can be so helpful and it has been helpful for people, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's Bible for you. And you have to take charge of your health and not outsource it to anybody, not to Matt, not to the next person, not to the neighbor, not to the doctor that you see every 6 months. It really is it's so important. And that is also a responsibility, right? And with that comes pressure, right?
Well, yeah, before we hit record, we were talking about just all the drama that can occur on social media and like
Yes.
celebrity type, looking up to people. And people have absolutely put me up on a pedestal, it's like a superhuman whatever. And I think why I've triggered people the most over the years, and there's all these terms that go along, grifter, or he changes, he's unreliable, he's always changing, I mean, that these are common things I've heard over the last 4 years. And uh, to me, that's a compliment that I'm always evolving and always changing. But I think some people use that as like an attack to try to discredit me, that it's just I'm sharing what I believe in at the time, and it's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's what
Right.
we do as humans.
Right.
It's to the best of my knowledge, this is what I understand things to be, and I think most people that have a following and that have this illusion of continuity, like they stay the same. They wrote a book, they did seminars, they did talks, they did the webinars and the groups and the coaching calls and all that. They're so married to the concepts of whether it's never supplement ascorbic acid, whole food C is safer, or never supplement zinc because it's going to deplete copper, or all these different ideas. And now the vitamin A toxicity thing the last couple of years has been growing in popularity, that everybody's vitamin A toxic. And it's always just like a new thing. But my point where I started is that a lot of these influencers, I noticed they'll change. And I mentioned going high carb, and they just kind of mention it casually on a podcast. There was no post on it. There was no podcast on it. Like I do solo shows, why I changed my mind.
Right.
There was no grand announcement. It was a in secret, kind of gradual, like, yeah, I'm eating 300 grams of carbs a day. And they might not even mention who inspired them to do that. Maybe even no mention of Ray Pete, or if it is, yeah, that guy, he also recommended Coca-Cola. So he said some crazy stuff, but his carb stuff was on point. It's like, I've heard that. It's like, I know Mexican Coke, to me, it's digestive aid. I mean, do the burger and fries, some vitamin E and a Mexican Coke. That's an awesome combo, in my opinion. I do that once a week minimum. But
You share your pictures.
yeah,
Yeah.
you got to live life and enjoy life. And I think having vices is healthy, and there's ways to mitigate it. I'm very open about my, cigar use, and I don't recommend everyone smoke, because I think a lot of people take it that way. They're like, oh, is tobacco healthy for everybody? I'm like, no, but look into all these compounds and why it could be helpful uh, for you.
Why do you think that so many people stay quiet in the practitioner space in terms of changing their mind, or if they do have other thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's fear of the public backlash that they would get, and the fear of losing subscribers or listeners, or uh, devotees, or whatever you want to call it, students. And I've never been afraid of that. And I was actually talking to my friend Matt about this the other day, that I forget the quote, but it's like, the more repulsive you are to the people that you don't want in your life, the more magnetic you are to the people that you do want in your life. And so
Wow.
that's been my experience personally, where I'll have these periods where it's like a massive split, almost like a seismic earthquake style split in the earth. And yeah, just massive unfollow, Oh, I think it was when I changed my mind about iron was the huge, just
Yeah.
category 10, whatever. And I think it was a beautiful thing because I don't want to be associated. I don't want to waste my time, my breath, my, typing on my phone to them, to any of those people that are put off by people changing their mind. I want to be surrounded by the people, and I want people listening to me that love changing their mind when new information is presented and love questioning their own beliefs. And I even did that. I went keto for a whole year last year, year straight, and I did the continuous blood glucose monitor. I was doing the finger prick, correlating it, different brands of the finger prick, device, correlating it with the CGM, trying different supplements. I mean, I went so deep into ketosis, and this is after 3 years on like the repeat lifestyle. I wouldn't call it a diet, like lifestyle. And people got so triggered by that, got called, like a grifter, like, oh, it's just, and it was an experiment. And I was very clear during the experiment. I said keto is not ideal for everyone. I never during that experiment said everyone should go keto. I'm just like, I'm not doing maple syrup. And it was, yeah, life without maple syrup was pretty miserable. So I don't recommend that.
I would have to agree. I would actually have to agree. I don't think I would recommend that either, but hey. I want to touch on something that you just said because I think it's really important. And I'm also going to share my like humanness with it as well. And that is the fact that, you mentioned how you don't really want to be surrounded or be ministering almost to people who are not open. And I think that there largely is this middle ground and middle area, which a lot of people fall into, which is that they really are they very much respect people like yourself who are doing so much due diligence, doing so much research, coming to the table with a lot of information. And then when there's a switch, when there's a turn, it jars them. And I'm honestly going to say that that was me as well. However, I think the key in that is that is the opportunity to sit with that and to ask yourself, why is it jarring you? You don't have to at first love the fact that the mind was changed from the person that you're invested in, right? I didn't love it. I didn't love it at first because I was in the cohort, and you know that, as I was telling you. I didn't love it at all. I was so thrown, but I took some time, and it wasn't right away. I'm not like, I didn't like just leave the program and I'm just like, whatever, Matt said it's over, so it's over. No, like I went through my own process, and I'm now at a place where I have a lot more respect for people who are open enough to that journey of changing their mind and evolving. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It's not something that, for me, it certainly wasn't overnight. I went through a little bit of a process myself, but I think the goal for people is to get there, and it's not like an end game. There's no end game because I'm going to say that you're probably going to believe something maybe different even in 5 years. I mean, that could be very much a possibility, right? But all that to say, it's really the problem is where the minds of the people who are like in that dogmatic approach, they get stuck because it shatters the illusion in which they're living in, and they don't know what to do with it. So instead of sitting with it, it's like, no, I'm just going to shun it. I'm going to shun it. Bad person, bad guy. I can't believe this. I'm hurt, and now I can't trust. And that might be those thoughts might initially come. But that it's important that you don't stay and camp out in that place for long. And I think that's part of the journey. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think people often forget that we're, like you mentioned, the mental aspect. There's a spiritual, energetic aspect. I mean, I briefly mentioned my paranormal childhood experiences, and I believe there's multiple layers to this reality that we can't perceive. And that really does impact physical health more than we would expect. I mean, obviously emotional, mental, spiritual. And I think people often treat us like were machines, and that's in the nutrition community. That's often how it is. And they want like a really strict, really rigid framework, even like the bioenergetic framework of the repeat thing. It's like I think there's more possibilities out there. Not to say that isn't, the closest thing to the truth, but that's not like the highest authority for our health. I mean, I've experienced being so on point so ninja with diets and my nutrition, what I'm eating, my supplements, and still be not at my top in health, and dealing with digestive issues. And that was due to like I've had intestinal issues and skin issues over the years from my living situation. So wrong relationship, either romantic or roommate style, and to where that amount of stress impacted my physical body so much that all the nutrition didn't matter. It didn't matter how much magnesium I was taking or anti-stress supplements or whatever. So that's often something too that I try to emphasize, even though everybody knows it deep down. It's like, assess your relationship, like girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband. Are you happy? Should you stay in it? Should you end it? I mean, it's a personal thing, but like also where you're living. Are you in the right state? Are you supposed to be in the mountains more than the desert, or vice versa? It's like there's a million things to assess that could affect your health way more than your nutrition and supplements. And that's been my experience. I mean, digestively healed within a few days of making a decision without changing anything. I've experienced that. So it's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of something that a past guest said. I just recently had a episode on mammography and sonography, and she's the founder of, this clinic in LA, and she made a couple comments, or we had like sort of this the conversation sort of turned a little bit, and it was largely on cancer and sickness and all of that, and it got pretty candid about mental and emotional awareness. And she said something along the lines of, when's the last time you just sat with yourself and really got quiet and thought about how you're feeling? Because that can tell you a lot about like what's going on with you physically, right? And it's so true. And I am equally as guilty. I think I'm a lot more in the know about that now, and I think I have a lot more wherewithal and awareness, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But that aspect often dictates the rest. And I'm not saying like it always does. Sometimes it is like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And sometimes you're not going to know. Right? You're just not going to know, because it sort of goes hand in hand. But so much of our health and well-being is wrapped around our environment, to your point, and our circumstances and the way that we feel. Not that we should always go by our feelings, because feelings are not always facts either.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just put that out there. And that is very true. But at the same time, like, how's your heart? How's your heart feeling? Right? And I don't mean like, is it pumping? I mean, like, how are you feeling in your heart? Right?
Yeah. And also, kind of connecting it to what we've been talking about over, like with all the switching and getting thrown off and people getting confused. A lot of the common messages I've received on social media was, Matt, you used to say this, now you're saying this. I'm so confused. That exact, quote over and over. I'm so confused. I'm lost. And it's like, you're not spending enough time by yourself then if you're getting overwhelmed by health information on social media, because I can binge health information and have zero change in my stress levels, and like zero change in like my inner chaos or whatever. And it's because I'm not glued to my screen every day. I go out and smoke a cigar, I go on my lake, I walk around the forest. Yeah. And maybe people aren't doing that enough. I just think they're not. I think most people probably aren't spending enough time alone, because that's uncomfortable for them. And I mean alone without listening to anything or messaging people. I mean, truly alone, just not just you and your environment, ideally outdoors. That's my favorite thing to do. And to me, that increases one's ability to decipher, discern, health information that we see online. And I think if someone's getting overwhelmed, that is a sure sign that they need to turn off their phone and go outside more.
Yes. Yeah. And you guys, let's see the comedy and the irony of what he's saying. You're listening to two podcast hosts right now tell you to get off your phone and stop listening to people and to actually spend some time alone. Okay. Like if we didn't care, we wouldn't be saying that to you. I'm serious. Like it is so absolutely true. You used the word maybe earlier. Like maybe people aren't doing that enough. No, I think it's like absolutely 1000% that is what's happening. And I get caught in that too. I don't necessarily get super overwhelmed anymore. I think I was there. I think I'm just more discerning. I think I don't play into a lot of things as much as I used to. But if I'm on my screen too much, I kind of feel like I'm like not really in reality anymore. Like I'm sort of like, I almost feel like a little drunk or like I have some brain fog. And so I see that with myself. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting off my screen and going out and sitting outside, just sitting out, taking my dogs, sitting out front in my house and just being like, okay, I'm going to listen to the birds. Right. And I know that sounds silly, but sometimes that's what we need. And you'd be shocked, just from a nervous system perspective alone, if you do that more often, what kind of small things like this, they'll have big impacts on you. Like
Oh
we're
yeah.
saying.
Yeah. And at a physiological level, I mean, our eyeballs are an extension of our brain and our nervous system, and they take a lot of oxidative stress. And so that's why we need, vitamin E and retinol that are involved in the eye health, and also just a whole lot of nutrients. But yeah, looking at a screen close up all day, or even a book, even a non-digital material close up, just short range. I mean, that's what changes the shape of our eye, and we get myopia, and that's a huge stressor. I mean, I noticed that for myself, that, and I use so I grew up myopic, and maybe that's because I was raised on video games before I got into health. And so just a lot of screens. And fortunately, I mean, the old school, GameCube, Xbox, PlayStation,
It
say
wasn't
Dream.
nearly as bad as it is now.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, no. We were still playing outside too. I mean, we had our my dad was a manufacturer's rep for video games.
Oh,
Side
cool.
note. So like
Wow.
so I really had access to all that stuff, but we were still outside, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had a above ground pool growing up, so I'd get out and get sunburned every summer. And I was eating my PUFAs, which made me a magnet to the sun, and
In your chlorinated pool.
a chlorinated pool.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about that too, because that was a huge insult to my body growing up, because everyone has their own story. Like we've been talking a lot about iron, but what I love about testing, and you don't have to get neurotic about it, is like finding your weakest link. And recently I interviewed one of the main distributors for the Oligoscan, which is spectrophotometry, which shines light on 4 points on your non-dominant hand because it's less calloused, and it shines light through, and it sees the absorption or reflection of nutrients, and you get an instant readout in the software. And I mean, if you want to get your own, it's pricey. It's like 4 or 5K to have your own. So usually find a practitioner, probably 100 to $200 somewhere in there, I'd guess, and get a scan. But then you can see the readout of your metals and what's high or low, and basically the relationship, kind of like HTMA, hair tissue mineral analysis, where they clip your hair, burn it, see the spectral emission, and then it's mostly looking at ratios, which is the power. So my iodine was low, and not in the red, but getting there. And I've been experimenting with fluoride for the past year and a half. And so that was not in the red too, but it was elevated. So it goes like green, yellow, red. And I was in the yellow on both. So I wasn't super high or super low in either one. But that was an eye opener for me, because I was like, wow, I haven't been supplementing iodine for 10 years or something. I mean, in my raw vegan days, it was the Lugol's iodine on the wrist, and I was painting myself in that daily, but it was only 4 drops a day, which is peanuts. And Dr. Brownstein, which is one of the world's experts on iodine, he cited a study. He said 80% of it 88% or something just goes into the air as vapor. So you're not absorbing much of the transdermal iodine, which I've not verified, but I trust him. His book on iodine is great. He goes on tons of podcasts talking about it. So I started taking recently like anywhere between 50 and 100 milligrams of iodine a day, split up, not all at once. And iodide and iodine. And I feel awesome, like $1,000,000. And, on the periodic table, there's the column with the halogens, and there's bromide, fluoride, and iodide. And they, bromide and chloride will displace iodine. And some pools actually use bromine instead of chlorine. That's an alternative. And you never know. Growing up, I probably soaked in bromine several times and I had no idea. And if there's no iodine coming in, I wasn't eating seafood for the first 30 years of my life for sure. I mean, oysters here and there, but just handful, not enough to correct a deficiency. I don't think we could generally correct deficiencies through food. To correct a severe deficiency, you need a megadose via supplementation. It doesn't have to be forever, but a short-term program to get back up to normal levels. So that's been a kind of a fun rabbit hole for me lately with the iodine and kind of connecting those dots. And then also the fluoride toothpaste, which I've been using topically, which obviously I'll back up. It's hard to say whether that fluoride in my system was from previous exposure or from recent exposure the last year and a half. Because when I first saw that result, I was like, wow, it only took a year for the fluoride from my toothpaste to get into the palm of my hand. Does that make sense? And kind of meditating on it. And maybe it could. I mean, I think things can move through our body pretty fast. Yeah. I just kind of emphasizing that weakest link point again, because I think that's a common question that I get, and going back to being overwhelmed and confused. It's like, make a starting point for yourself. Looking back at my life, I used to sneak into hotels with my friends, like jump the fence, open it up, and get into the pool and the jacuzzi, and did that my whole childhood, and got in trouble a few times for it. I would get the rash and just get slammed with the chemicals and then go and shower in tap water. And I just got bombed with halogens for 30 years, pretty much. Well, I'd say at least 10 years nonstop. And so obviously for me, that was going to create an iodine deficiency, like at the receptor level, which I'm probably going to need to supplement iodine for a while, because that was a long time that I was creating that deficiency. So that I found that was my weakest link recently, like the last few months, which is pretty exciting. So
it's really interesting. I actually heard you just, I think you mentioned this when you were doing the podcast with the oligo scan. That's what it's called, right?
Oligo scan. Yeah.
Oligo scan. I always feel like I have a problem saying it. I'm like, but when you were doing the podcast on the scan, I think that you mentioned it. But what's interesting is I guess I didn't know the full dot connecting, because I have had such a similar experience. And just yesterday, I sent an email to a company who I've been like, I think that your iodine got lost in the mail, because I have sort of been connecting some dots with my own health. And I really feel like I need to experiment with iodine. I even had it muscle tested last night to see if it was something that my body sort of needed, because I intuitively felt like it was something that I needed, because there's some adrenal discrepancies going on that I'm really trying to fix, and some other things. And if I take it back, I am almost exactly like you. So I started competitively swimming at 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was competing at 5. I competed on and off and swam competitively in high school as well. And I stopped I think I stopped before my senior year because there was some issues and some health stuff. And my health fell drastically when I hit my senior year. I actually almost didn't graduate high school. So looking back at that, and your mention of chlorine and halogens and all of that, that was probably something that was affecting me drastically as well and not knowing it. So, of course, now it's like been decades, but I'm sort of putting this together. And I just intuitively, actually, also after interviewing somebody who spoke on it for women's health and adrenal and thyroid function, I thought to myself, I don't even know what my levels are. I haven't gotten a scan. But I still feel like I need to experiment with it. And so I'm on the cusp of doing that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a horrible swimmer, by the way. I did
Yeah.
I think my parents took me to the YMCA and I almost drowned, but then I got into scuba diving. So if you put
Oh,
a BCD on me and fins, I'm good.
you're good.
I can make it around.
You're good.
But I wanted to talk about or just mention vitamin C as well.
Yes.
And I think recently I saw a product for swimmers. There's like vitamin C sprays, which you can make your own
Mm-hmm.
probably, but spray that ascorbic acid on the skin. And so, to my knowledge, and there's probably more, but I know for sure, and you could even search on PubMed ascorbic acid or vitamin C chlorine, and you'll see the connection there. But it's not just iodine, because for years, that's what I heard. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, fluoride will deplete your iodine. Well, Brown Seed says bromide actually does it more because bromide is actually closer molecularly than fluoride um, to iodine. But the ascorbic acid vitamin C piece was huge because I was probably depleting, or I was, and you as well, depleting your tissue levels of ascorbate of vitamin because it's stored everywhere. I mean, it's in the eyes, it's in the skin. And the funny thing, you know, people often say, like when I've made my vitamin C recommendations, they're like, oh, that's nobody needs to take more than 200 milligrams or 400 milligrams or whole food C is enough. No, it's it's ascorbic acid that is used in the body, and you have breakdown products of it, so it can donate 1 or 2 electrons, and then you have dehydroascorbic acid. So it's also that DHA word, but it's not docosahexaenoic acid omega-3. It's dehydroascorbic acid. And then you have ascorbate, and there's all these like big breakdown products that ultimately all come from ascorbic acid, synthetic or from an apple or from an orange or banana or whatever. It's all molecularly identical. And if you can take it consistently, you actually get equivalent to a vitamin C IV, and even better, because in an IV, you're going to be getting sodium ascorbate, which is buffered, versus ascorbic acid, which has different properties, like better redox properties, and has abilities to protect your body from EMFs. If you look at it under an electron microscope, ascorbic acid, it's this beautiful rainbow pop of colors. Like it's an amazing, it absorbs a lot of wavelengths of light. It's a really just magical compound. It's pretty impressive. I mean, Linus Pauling kind of started it, and then Doris Lowe recently has amazing information on it. And just educating people. It's like, no, it's not about megadosing. It's about slow, frequent low frequent doses of vitamin C. That's the power. So it's like 1 gram, or in my case, 1.2 grams for the Mitolife when you're traveling every hour, or if you're sick and you're fighting an infection, every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, take a dose. And it's like, that's where you get up and you build the plasma levels. And there's studies on this. You take it consistently, it just keeps building and building and building, get equivalent to an IV. And then once your plasma's peaked, then it starts pushing into your heart, into your muscles, into your eyes, into your brain. I mean, your adrenals are big requirement for vitamin C. And that's how you become sufficient. And if you have a history like us of swimming in chlorinated pools or treated pools in general, it's probably good to do a round of building back up your vitamin C levels, because just taking it once a day is not going to do it. So,
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I'm sort of on that track now with figuring out that aspect because I'm seeing my adrenal health just a lot slower in recovery. right now. There's just some discrepancies and variance, just some things that have occurred. I mean, life. Hello. Life has happened, right? And so adrenal health has been something that I've been working on, and I've been putting these pieces together. And I wanted to just mention too, for those listening who are like, well, I'm not sure, like, what do you mean there's a difference? So there is a difference in vitamin C supplements. And so what Matt is talking about is that there is a camp, or there are people out there that say that whole food vitamin C is really the way to go, and that's the safest option for you. And then there's ascorbic acid. A lot of times you see it as AA, or you'll see it added to supplements sometimes as well. That is the dangerous form of vitamin C. And so what he is saying is that it's actually not as dangerous as he once thought, and that there's a lot of research that shows that it can be extremely helpful, especially when you're super depleted. And I want you to talk on the point of where, like, people say that it depletes you, right? So, like, okay, if you take AA, then you're going to be depleted in copper, or you're going to be, there's other things, but let's just start there.
Yeah. So the copper one is complex, and I really like the old school orthomolecular books. Linus Pauling's hard to find his material. I haven't really had success. Carl Pfeiffer, more so. And there's Cathcart that was out of Nevada City, I think, or somewhere out of Nevada. And these guys that were experimenting with, Abram Hoffer, obviously. There was the niacin therapy, which was used for schizophrenia, high dose vitamin B3, sometimes single dose, completely alleviated, like I'm talking about like you see in movies, schizophrenia, like a single dose, cured, at least temporarily. So that's the power of vitamin supplementation. And then for vitamin C, Incline Village, that was the town I was trying to think of. There's a doctor there decades ago, Cathcart, that was using high dose vitamin C for like almost 50% of the town, and for every different possible chronic condition, different dosages for different conditions, and seeing results. And so Carl Pfeiffer wrote a lot about the power of zinc, and a lot of these guys talked about copper toxicity. A lot of the orthomolecular guys would talk about copper toxicity, and there are whole chapters, and like Zinc and Other Micronutrients is one of my favorite books. Carl Pfeiffer, just great information in there. And he had a whole section on copper toxicity and what it does and where you get it from. And it's linked to different mental disorders, depression, schizophrenia. And a lot of it's from like copper pipes in the house, which I used to discount, especially when I was in that kind of religious mindset of, oh no, there's not enough copper, to make a difference and dose people on it. But it really depends. I mean, if someone doesn't have a whole house filter, or even just an under counter drinking water filter under their kitchen sink, yeah, they are getting microdoses of copper. Absolutely. And even if they're buying bottled water, especially if they're buying bottled spring water, you have no clue the mineral content of that. You're just trusting that nature knows best. And well, it's in glass and it says spring water, so it must be good. But how much copper's in there? No idea. So, some companies have a whole report that you can get.
Breakdown.
Yeah. But if you're a lot of people now find a spring. I did that for years, and no idea if you're just harvesting it yourself from the spring. So a lot of sources of copper, though. I mean, obviously IUD, and I mean, there's a million places where it's coming in. And the community that we were in, they talk a lot about this protein called ceruloplasmin, which contains copper, and that has a lot of effects on the body, specifically with regulating, what iron does. But then you look up studies on high ceruloplasmin, and it's linked to schizophrenia. So if ceruloplasmin gets too high, you'll go schizophrenic, likely. And I think that's downplayed a little more. I mean, you think about it, something you see in like, you know, like the Russell Crowe movie and Beautiful Mind or something. It's like, no, that could happen. It's not just in the movies. Like schizophrenia is real. And the cool thing about vitamin C is it does have this balancing effect on copper, and they have used it for copper toxicity in like mega doses to bring it down. And I've written posts on it. I think it's just super. I think the problem with that philosophy is ceruloplasmin is like put on this pedestal as like it's literally been called the God
The God
particle. I've heard
particle.
people, yeah.
I was like, if you're not going to say it, I'm going to say
Yeah.
it.
Which is like, yeah, it's like this weird elitism with with nutrients.
Nutrients. Yeah.
It's like that's not how we need to think about human health. It's like everything works together.
Right. Right.
Nothing's better than and it's a pro-oxidant if it's too high. So yeah, I mean it's one thing I think if you're megadosing vitamin C, like, and I'm adding a small amount of copper to my future zinc formula, just a very, very small amount. And if you're getting up there, like I've done, 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams of zinc daily for periods of time, you definitely want to be taking some copper because you will deplete it,
Yeah.
and also some vitamin C because those three nutrients kind of work together. And it's about keeping a balance. And I think going back to exposure, and you can't, LegoScan does show copper and zinc ratio. HTMA shows copper and zinc ratio. There is a connection to, without even needing a test, looking at graying of hair. So the bleaching of hair, whether beard or top of your head, that's because of hydrogen peroxide. And if there's a copper deficiency, that can cause premature graying. Or if there's even a zinc deficiency and too much copper and an imbalance that way too, that can cause premature graying. And I do believe it's possible to reverse gray hair. Balding's a different story. Yeah.
I've seen it. I've actually seen people who've reversed it. I think you've
Yep.
talked about it too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm working on my beard because I mean, like you, like life, like, I mean, the
Right.
stressors, and
Exactly.
we don't, you don't talk about it publicly, and you never know what someone's going through, but it's like that will tax your nutrients significantly, just life events.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to ask you a question about the people who think that it's risky to take ascorbic acid because of the kidneys or kidney stones.
Oh yeah.
Would that be something to be concerned about in your opinion? Is that like that's an oxalate issue, isn't it?
Yeah. And some people are back to like iron. There is a genetic predisposition to the formation of stones, kidney stones, calcium oxalates. I mean, there's different types of oxalate stones. That's where it'd be good to know your genetics, because that definitely plays a role there. Like I would say a huge role. But I believe that's overblown.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, the main thing with that is as long as you're hydrated, you don't really have to worry about oxalates. So as long as you have liquids moving through your kidneys, and I mean, I urinate several times a day. I mean, I'm just drinking liquids
You
all day
are.
long.
Yeah.
And I think in some communities, there's kind of like there's dry fasting. There's communities that say that you don't need to drink water. I know people in the repeat community say that. Augenus Vonderplan's community says that. Oh, hydration, you just get that from coffee or orange juice or milk. Like, you don't ever need to drink water or any of their liquids. Like, that is nuts to me. And I think that is kind of driving this oxalate issue that is perpetuated. So that's where I'm at. I mean, I would definitely look at your genetic mutations. Self-decode is a good one. There's other ones out there to make sure you're not predisposed to that. But I do think that issue's way overblown.
I think social media is a part of that as well. Not to say that
Yep.
there aren't some people who have legit reasons why they need to be mindful or they have issues, but I think social media has taken it and ran with it a bit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I want to make a comment really quick just to be clear about, and it's probably my fault I didn't set it up appropriately because we were going into vitamin C next. But when we were talking about chlorine, you guys, when he was talking about chlorine spray, the reason why it fit so nicely into it sort of segued into vitamin C is because it can negate the negative effects of chlorine. So if you spray your body or you take the appropriate amount for your body of ascorbic acid, it could actually help negate. And a lot of people do it topically, which I wish I would have known. Like you, I wish I would have known that because I lived in the pool for so long, and I don't discount the fact that probably in part took me down hard, because
yeah.
again, it was like my life, you know.
Yeah, probably the 1-2 punch of depleting iodine and ascorbate, which those are two pretty central nutrients.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call them God particles, but
Yeah. Well, and the crazy part is, just to like share a little bit more about what happened with me. So after I stopped swimming, I stopped because I had an issue that did not have to do with health. It was more like coach related, but is that I was deemed anemic. I was deemed super anemic. So they took me out of all sports and they put me on iron pills. So I think I was super depleted. And then I was also taking iron supplementation, but the iron supplementation at the time, it was probably not the best. I was going by a pediatrician recommendation there, we're talking about the 90s here. And I probably was just so depleted. It wasn't really moving the needle. And then within a couple months, I fell hard with mono. And like just had a really tough recovery from that. And so I think I was just so depleted from all those things. I can't even imagine what these little remedies would have done to change the course, right?
yeah, yeah, and just the complexity of how all these nutrients work together. Like I mentioned, like the zinc, copper, ascorbic acid trio. Like there's a synergy there, but probably your iron supplementation, if you had other nutrients coming in, maybe it would have worked better.
Exactly. Exactly. Because in fact, I probably was iron deficient. Whether it was, true anemia or iron deficiency, like I'm not sure. I don't have those records of about what things looked like. And, with ranges and stuff like that, it gets to be a little complicated depending on who's reading it. But at the end of the day, it definitely would have been helpful to know then what we know now.
Yeah. Cool little side fact I learned yesterday, because I'm doing a solo podcast for this week. And so I recorded yesterday. I'm going to record tomorrow to finish it. And I was talking a little bit about shelf life and on vitamin C. It's kind of fun. I found a study from the 70s, I think it was 1976, that looked at potency loss after storage for 5 years. And it was only 5% loss.
Wow.
So that's a good little prepping tip, as far as like rainy day, first aid cabinet, supplement storage. I mean, a lot of people don't know vitamin C, even for like insect bites or snake bites, spider bites, anything like that. I would take a ton of vitamin C if that ever happened to me, because it's going to neutralize, a lot of different animals. That read that in the literature. So yeah, 5 years of storage, pretty good thing to stockpile.
That is like we were chatting about beforehand. I think it's time for a prep podcast on Mitolife Radio. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. Like, like a balanced prep podcast without freaking out, right? No fear attached. No fear attached.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say about zinc? Because I recently, again, it's sort of one of my recent come arounds with zinc. And it's funny that you mentioned zinc and copper, because I have a supplement here right now that is a zinc complex and it has copper in it. Because that is what I figured I probably needed to start with. I also, it was recommended to me by my practitioner because I have something going on with my skin, like a pigmentation issue that sort of like appeared out of nowhere. And when I was muscle tested for it, it came up as a mineral imbalance and that I was low in zinc. But to not fully Yeah, not
Interesting.
fully go full blown zinc without taking a little bit of copper. So I thought
Hmm.
it's super interesting that like now again, here I am, right? Like coming from a place of I can never take
Hmm.
zinc to actually taking zinc, but in moderation and
Hmm.
according to what I'm, I should say under the care of someone guiding me. But is there anything you want to say about zinc? Because I feel like I realize we can go in a million different places, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons why people can get zinc deficient.
Oh, tons. Yeah. And like a lot of my issues growing up, as I mentioned, were skin related. So specifically eczema and then acne vulgaris. And with any kind of skin condition, there's a lot of uh, deficiencies involved. And, they use like Accutane, which is synthetic vitamin A. So there's a vitamin A connection,
Yeah.
but there's also a zinc connection with the skin. There's also a vitamin C connection for making collagen. Um, there's vitamin E is huge for the skin. So if someone's had skin issues like myself their whole life, off and on, maybe even to this day, even being ninja, which has been my experience, which back in the day, I started to think, oh, maybe it's just a deep rooted fungal infection, just chronic, and that's what's just making it constant. But for my research, it's mostly going to be deficiencies. And obviously, infections and deficiencies go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So as you treat deficiencies, you're going to start handling deep-rooted infections. But that's just an easy way to check. And also, brain fog is a sure sign of zinc deficiency. Vision problems, we know with the last 4 years with the pandemic thing, if you lose your taste and smell, zinc's involved in that. And that happened to me. So I've had it 4 times, and it happened to me. And each time it was like 5 days or less. Just took a break off work. It was no big deal.
Yeah.
But I lost my taste and smell. I think the longest period was like 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. And I credit that to Mitolife supplements and to supplements in general, because I know a lot of people lost it for months and maybe even still don't have it back. And so zinc's heavily involved in taste and smell, and you can actually bring it back with zinc potentially. Um, uh, Fertility and reproduction, huge in that. I know a lot of women are concerned with that and have issues with that. Vitamin E was originally known as the fertility vitamin. So vitamin E is often overlooked for making babies, but also zinc deficiency for both the man and the woman, for eggs and for sperm quality. Um, Vision issues is another thing, or even just people like us, podcast hosts, or people that work in an office. You need zinc in the eyes for proteins and enzymes in the eyes to function. So our zinc requirements go up the more screen time we have, basically. Um, uh, and then yeah, mood. I mean, I mentioned the brain fog, but also just depression, anxiety. A lot of people have social anxiety. A lot of that is mitigated. That's been my experience personally with zinc. Um, just increased confidence and more like it just feels very like grounding,
Mm.
versus copper to me personally feels more airy. And in my times of megadosing it, I've felt like I was almost raw vegan at certain times again, because I was like in the clouds. I'm like, oh wait, maybe I need zinc to balance this out. Also blood sugar regulation's huge. So diabetics are deficient in zinc generally, or people that have just, they'll eat a meal and they'll feel very fatigued after, usually zinc's deficient. Um, so those are some things to look for with that. I forget your original question.
No,
Sorry.
no, you covered it. I think you answered
Okay,
it
cool.
because it was about deficiencies with zinc and just like because
Hmm.
I feel like some people are probably listening and thinking, well, like how, like what would even be a sign of that? And again, like
Yeah.
there are so many things that run. To your point that we've kind of been talking about this whole time is that like everything is in ratio, everything works together. Nothing
Yeah.
is just like isolated, just the way no body part of ours is isolated. So it's best to have a starting point and get testing, appropriate testing. Do you think that just going to the doctor and getting straight blood work for this kind of stuff is ideal, or like would you recommend what would your like ideal protocol be for someone who's just like the average person that just wants to get a good base foundation?
Mhm. Yeah, as far as like traditional blood work, um, there's certain tests, like I mentioned, 25D,
Yeah.
there's serum ferritin. Those are two really good tests because those could quickly tell you, uh, if your vitamin D's tanked or if it's super high, you're going to have issues with parathyroid hormone. You're probably going to have calcification issues. So we're talking about soft tissue calcification, which can be a root cause to cardiovascular disease and all sorts of health problems. So just back to like the, uh, starting point, those are the two tests for that. But yeah, to answer your question directly, I would not put much weight into other tests. I mean, there might be a few others that I'm just not thinking of at the moment, but a lot of these nutrients are stored in deep in the body, in the organs, the glands. So when we're talking about like fat soluble A, D, E, and K, they're fat soluble. They're not going to be floating around in your plasma. They're not going to be in your blood. They're going to be a lot in the liver. They're going to be, you know, pancreas, kidneys, they're going to be throughout your body inside the tissues that a blood test is not. Blood test is picking up circulating stuff, which can be useful. Check your testosterone, check your estrogen, whatever. For zinc and copper, I would ideally, in a perfect world, do both the OligoScan and the HTMA, or just one or the other, but ideally both, and just kind of correlate them and see if they both point to, either you need more zinc or you need more copper, and then narrow it down there. And it's just amazing that ratio alone, that zinc and copper ratio, how much that affects in our body hormonally, mentally, emotionally. It's a huge piece, like on the level of the iron thing. I mean, maybe even more so.
Yeah.
And just the fact that zinc's been demonized by that community, and it's crazy because for me it's medicine, and I came out with zinc carnosine. That's one thing I wanted to bring up is what it's bound to. So it's called chelated minerals. So you can't just take a straight elemental magnesium or a straight elemental copper. It has to be bound to a an amino acid generally. So whether that's glycine, taurine, or an acid like stearic acid or uratic acid called orotate, which is the copper I'm going to put in the zinc is copper orotate, which is a cool form. But a lot of supplement companies now, I notice this trend where they're like putting in a million forms, like all 7 forms of zinc, and they're marketing all 7 forms of magnesium, multiple forms of magnesium, multiple forms of zinc. I encourage people not to go for that marketing tactic because you want to get the benefits of what it's bound to. So, for example, the magnesium I sell, you take 3 capsules and you're only getting 300 milligrams of elemental magnesium. It's a relatively small amount, but if you take it once or twice a day, it adds up. You're mostly getting in my magnesium product glycine and taurine amino acid, which I take those in isolation from my friend Adam by themselves for their benefits because it's like huge
Huge.
benefits throughout the body for those 2 amino acids. So in this case of carnosine, if I had 5 different forms of zinc in there, you wouldn't be getting like 75 milligrams of carnosine per capsule. And I often take like 8, 10, 12 capsules of my zinc carnosine every day. It's just where I'm at currently. So I'm getting a significant amount of that amino acid carnosine. And when you look into it, it's an antioxidant. It protects the gut lining. It heals lesions in the gut, lowers inflammation, mitigates oxidative stress in the intestinal tract. And from my observation, talking to people, my personal experience, most people are inflamed with their gut. I mean, they're just constantly battling all these, tons of just oxidative stress in their intestinal tract. And so for me, that's like carnosine as a start. And when you look at zinc with carnosine, it's even more effective on protecting the gut and gastrointestinal diseases. And even there's studies on zinc carnosine for colorectal cancer treatments.
Wow.
So
Wow. Wow.
uh,
Yeah, it's really just important, or not important. It's important too, but it is wild, I should say, to just see how full circle you've come when it comes to looking at these nutrients. Really, I mean, it's pretty wild, and it's just it's odd too, because just sitting here today having this conversation with you, I've experienced like several things, and while I may not have been as experimental as you through the years, or done, like high intense, like mega dosing of certain supplements. I mean, obviously this is your thing, this is your gig, this is where you excel, and this is your passion, and all of that. But it's wild because I feel as though I just keep saying it, but like nuance is everything.
it is.
It really is. It's everything. And I can't, I can't say it enough, and I know that as we kind of taper down here, I want to encourage people too, that there's just not going to be somebody that you're going to find that's going to give you the miracle cure or the miracle answer. Speak to that, because I know that you want to say something.
Yeah. A frequently asked question I get is, where did you learn all of this? Is there a book? What's your
Right,
favorite book? Like, they want me to hand them like the health Bible.
right, right.
And I always have to tell them I'm self-taught. I actually didn't learn this in school, 5% of it. I mean, very small amount. And that's not the answer they want. And so people do want to be spoon fed. They want it all in one. I mean, I get asked to write a book constantly, and I just go back and forth with it because things will change. As you said, 5 years, I'll probably have
Yeah,
radically different belief about something.
yeah,
And I guess that's where you like update the book and have additions or whatever. But uh yeah, that's not how human health is. It's very, cliche. It's very individual. And there's just like you said, you use the word nuance. And we all have our story. I mean, I will say I created the CLF protocol, I think back in 2019 or early 2020. And
it's
that's,
right when I found you. I think you had created it.
yeah, and that was like my best shot at a one size fit all, but a very gentle, broad
Yes,
one.
yes,
And it's kind of based on testing, because I don't just say supplement vitamin D. I talk about this bell-shaped curve of, it's not about that vitamin D is always toxic, but it's, if you're too low, that can have its own toxicity. Or if you're too high, same thing. So I try to build in the nuance with it. But yeah, there's general things to me, like we all generally need fat soluble vitamins. We all need water soluble vitamins. We all have the same organs and glands, but it's just how much of each nutrient, how long do we megadose for a short period of time to get back into balance, creating our own little protocol with things. Because that's, people ask me all the time, how much do I take? What's the dose? I'm always posting studies, my little daily coffee pour
yeah.
things on Instagram, and people always, what's the dose for that? And it's like, yeah, you can get into the millimolar concentration they used in the study and try to dial it in, but you're not going to be able to emulate
Right,
the study,
right.
even if the results look awesome and you want to get those results. To me, I would just take the studies for what they are, say, wow, this nutrient can have that effect. Let me just take it daily for a while and see experientially if I get that effect for the chronic condition or whatever I'm trying to improve. So it's generally not the answers that, and I'm sure you get the same thing from people. It's like they want to get a certain answer from you and you don't give it to them. And it's,
It's hard. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is it promotes a lot of anxiety in someone because they just want to know, and they feel like there should be. And here's the thing, like in an ideal world, Yeah, it would be nice to have like this expert in front of us all the time, just being like, here you go, here's
Yeah.
the answer, here's the supplement, here's the directions, but that's just not real world. It's not real life. And in
Yeah.
today's times, it's really not real world. It's really not real life, because if there's been anything we've learned in the last few years, it's that you have to take your health into your own hands, and you might have to self experiment. You might have to go to a couple different practitioners and see who fits you best in terms of guidance, but they're still not going to be God for you. They're still not going to have all the answers, and they're still not going to be able to heal you, because nobody here on earth can heal you. Your body is innately able to heal given the right conditions and circumstances and tools, but it's equally up to you and your discernment and your work and your research, yada, 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 to get to that place. And you can't be afraid of that responsibility. Bottom line.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I would just encourage people to take it slow. I mean, where I'm at now took me 14 years to get to, as far as knowledge and experiments with experience with technology, health technology, supplements, nutrition. It's just a long journey. And if you're only into it a couple years or even 5 years or even 10 years, there's still a lot to learn and tools to add to your toolkit. And I'm just grateful where I'm at, where when something comes up, I know immediately I'm just going to use this machine and up my dose of this
Yeah.
and
Yeah. You're
and
tweaking
get
things all the time.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
you're just going by intuition a lot of times as well. I mean, you share
Mhm.
enough to where people can get a bird's eye view in to
Mhm.
what you do and how you do it and how you handle things when you're not feeling super well, or it's like you've been gracious enough to be like, this is what I'm doing. And also you say, I realize not everybody has the gadgets and the tools and all the things. I mean, this is your passion, and your life revolves around health and research, so you're gonna obviously have more things to play around with and tinker around with. It's just how it is. And not everybody has that, but there's still like the overarching point is that you're still kind of like, I'm doing what you guys should be doing. Like, yes, you have the research under your belt. You've definitely, you've dove in head first for several years. But it's important to your point, take it slow, and also just realize that you might not get all the answers, but if you just trust that your body is going to give you the information, if even if you do, you're guided by a practitioner, or you do a little bit of self experimentation, etc., your body is going to let you know.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day, your
Yeah.
body's going to let you know, and you're going to be able to dictate how you feel. It's not to say go psycho and, get all irresponsible and start, down in bottles of this, that, and the other. You don't have to do that, but it's important to tune in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And don't get to that point of being overwhelmed from information. Like we said earlier, remembering the basic stuff to go outside. You don't even have to move. Go outside and sit, and no earbuds in, just
Yeah.
listening to birds, like you said, or nature, and
Yeah.
going on walks. That's such a reset for me. And it absolutely um, helps to keep me grounded. And when new information comes in, I feel like I can break it down easier, and I'm at a more still spot in my mind to take in the information. And I don't think a lot of people are there right
No.
now.
No,
So,
no. And I think it's important to remember that big or small things are actually oftentimes the big things, like they move the needle more than, like, you might think that you need like the fanciest of fancy and all that,
mhm.
but that walk or that, 20-minute break that you take outside listening to the birds, that can do more for you than a supplement sometimes can, right? Like, it's so impactful, and people underestimate the fundamentals.
Yeah, my therapy's been gardening, and I didn't think I was going to love it this much. And even battling the little aphid
Oh,
critters, it's still such, because I mentioned AI earlier, and I don't want to, open up that can of worms, but it is a can of worms. And I think a lot of jobs are going to be obsolete, and we're going to have to find meaning. And even just, even just in a grid down situation, like a SHTF situation, you know, uh, you're going to need those skills, and it's something basic to know how to grow food.
Mm.
And so for me, it's been so rewarding and just giving me peace that through trial and error, through failure of working with the soil and watching the plants, and oh, that one died, oh, this one's thriving, what did I do? That's filled me with just so much peace, and really just energized me, because I feel that, yeah, researching nutrition and stuff, but stuff hits the fan. Supplements are only going to last so long. This information's not going to be as useful. It's going to be, not to get doomsday at the end, but growing out how to grow stuff. I mean, just tomatoes. I mean, knowing how to grow potatoes, like
Yeah.
basic stuff. It's good to know. And that's been my little piece in my dome, to go in there. No music, not listening to anything, put my phone away and just
Yeah.
have fun.
Yeah. Well, you're living also, like there's somebody be like life is medicine. And when you're actually just in it and you're present and you're living, and it's not you're not into, in the screen all the time, and you're not wrapped up in your own thoughts. I mean, it could be really meditative. It's medicine, when you live and you're present. You could be having a conversation with somebody, or you could be with yourself doing the gardening, or, going on a walk. But that stuff is all to be taken into account when it comes to how your body is honestly operating off of like a frequency level, like when you are always tied to the overwhelm and social media and screens and worry and fear, you're going to be operating at such a lower level. And that's going to have such an effect on, honestly, the way you heal too, So if you're in a health situation, you should really take a look. I think, again, we're like sort of talking around we're talking about the same, or we're talking around the same water cooler, but it really is like so true.
Yeah. I mean, people talk about dopamine detox and stuff. And to me, yeah, it's cool. Take a day off here or there. I don't really need it too much. I mean, yeah, responding to people, I need a break from that. But what I found personally, and if someone has the capability, especially if they live in a city, sensory deprivation flotation therapy is, I mean, talk about disconnect. It's like you're in space for an hour. And if you could do that once a week or once a month, especially if your job involves the internet, that to me was a game changer. So I haven't done it in, I don't know, year and a half, but I'm going to get back into it soon with the Royal Spa pod. And whether you can have your own, which is ideal if you have a big garage to put it in, or you can go to a center, that's just been such a game changer. I've had full just nervous system resets in there that I didn't think could happen, just because nervous system was like, okay, it's okay to let go. And then it's just, a little release, a little shake, and you get out of there feeling like you're on cloud nine. So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there as a therapy, because I think that's so underrated, and it's actually hard because it's kind of boring, and it's like you don't really want to do it.
Yeah.
It's like super meditation. A lot of people don't want to meditate. It's like in there, it's accelerated.
Oh my gosh.
But it's
Okay,
worth
so now that you brought it up, I'll just share this. I'll try to be as brief as possible. And I feel like I've shared it probably on an episode before to some degree, but I went to a float spa out here, and I went twice so far. I still have one to use left. And the first time I went, I would say from the first, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, I was so nervous, like meaning that all of the nervous energy was like coming to the surface almost, because I had to put everything away. Things were totally dark. I did not know what to do with all of this excess energy. And that's when it really hit me. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I am so wired. And I thought, where's this anxiety coming from? Well, it was just from doing nothing, which is scary. Okay. Because that just tells you how much we're completely just engaged all the time, and we do not slow down. My second time was better, a lot better. And I also knew what to expect too, which could have been somewhat of, what was happening the first time. But just really interesting to be in a situation like that where you're like forced to slow down, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
It was gnarly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was experimenting for a while, and not to go off on this too much, but I'm into a lot of little weird therapies. And for people that have been in the health field for a while, Patrick Flanagan was like one of the OGs, and he fortunately passed away years ago. But he invented a really interesting ultrasonic device called the neurophone. And I think this was back in like the 80s or 90s. Like it was a while ago. And maybe even his first version was like 70s. I mean, he was in it for decades. And uh, it's basically a little 9-volt battery, a little box like about this big that has two transducers that you put on your forehead, and it runs ultrasound into your skull. But the interesting thing, it has an in jack for audio, like a 3.5 mm, like audio jack. You'd hook up like an iPad or iPod or whatever and listen to music or whatever through your skull. So it actually takes a different pathway into the brain than the ears.
Oh, whoa.
And that's actually how I rewired my brain for monetary stuff and self-worth, was through subliminal messages for like 6 months to a year or something like that, when I was working 3 jobs, making minimum wage, getting yelled at by my managers, living at my parents' house. And I rewired my brain to gain the confidence to start my own business and to actually start even just speaking publicly and sharing. So I really credit subliminal messages to a lot of my journey. And what's crazy is I've actually run that through the water in my pod. So subliminal messages through through that device into the float pod.
Oh, wow.
And that is kind of like an advance. I mean, you could just do
Yeah.
the subliminals by themselves, but
Wow.
that was like a fun little thing that I did for a while. And that's to take it to the next. There's a website called realsubliminal.com, and there's an app, so you could pay. It's like $10 a track. It's cheap, and you could put them on the app and then play that either silently or with like a rain water flowing noise. But
Wow.
I wanted to throw that out there as a therapy, because a lot of this stuff's mental, emotional, and I do believe that we can rewrite our mind from everything. I mean, money beliefs, addiction, relationship beliefs. It's kind of crazy. I mean, that part of us is definitely like a machine computer that we can absolutely rewire with
least.
subliminal messages. Yeah.
To say the least, and not always in a good way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, not always in a good way. Oh my goodness. Well, honestly, I feel like this podcast, there's so many questions, right? Like we could go into other things that you've changed your mind
We
on.
can do it again.
We
Yeah.
can. We should. We should.
Yeah,
We'll
let's
tap
do
it,
it.
and let's do it. Let's plan on it, because and in time there might be some additional things that you're
Yeah.
having fun with. But what I will ask you to end is what, and again, you've been giving advice this whole time. Okay. So it's not, please, you guys. I mean, he's given so many little nuggets of like where you can start, what you should be looking at, etc. But for the person who just still feels like they can't get ahead, they're stuck in overwhelm, maybe they're stuck in fight or flight, or maybe they've been suffering for a really long time, and they're just looking for a starting point, but in a way that just feels doable. What would you say to them?
I would say listen to either Vanessa's podcast or mine or both, but don't binge listen unless you have a long road trip. But listen to the episodes that you're drawn to, with the title or the description or both. And maybe you resonate with the person that's being interviewed, and have fun experimenting. Like, make it fun. Don't make it like a job. Like, oh, I have to figure out this complex puzzle of this chronic illness I've had for years. Like, make it into like a little, like a fun puzzle, like to figure out. And obviously balancing that with outdoor time and disconnecting, but just go in and out of the research on it. And I think the guest that you're having on, the guest that I'm having on, it's not surface level alternative health stuff. And I guess everybody says that, but ours is truly that. And like you said, all the little nuggets that we've shared in this show, those are great starting points. maybe guests in other shows. I mean, you're not going to have to take notes on 100% of all the shows, but take note of the things in the shows that you're listening to that feel like they can move the needle, that feel actionable, that you can actually make a move on and change something, improve something in your life to get a better outcome. And that's where I mean, that's honestly how I started. So when I was doing Uber and Lyft and just getting by financially, I was a cannabis delivery driver. I was living on podcasts in my car because I was just on the road so many hours during the day. And it wasn't like I was taking 100% of every podcast and internalizing it. Honestly, 90% of it probably went over my head, but certain little lines would stand out. And then I would just dive deeper into those, and not even into other podcasts, just experientially. Oh, wow, that's a really interesting thing that person said. Let me like dive into that with my life and see if there's truth to it. And that was so invaluable to me. And I actually figured out my personal health things. That was my starting point doing that. And so, yeah, I think people are just afraid to, like, they're so paralyzed that, taking action is the hard part, but it's really not, especially like I said, if you try to make it fun and make it like just, I mean, especially once you start seeing results, because what I share, it's like a lot of people message me like, wow, Matt, I've had this for years and years and years, or infertility stuff, and it turned around within weeks because of XYZ combination of supplements, or maybe even one supplement, just taking it in the right dose. So it could be quick, it could be long, but either way, try to change your mindset on it, that, it's something to drudge through and suffer through. It's like, it's not that serious. Like, I mean, we could all go out with a solar flare tomorrow, or who knows what. So
that is also very true. Probably like more of a possibility than people realize.
Yeah, there was recently a bunch, and my buddy that goes fishing, he said none of the fish were biting that next day after the big geomagnetic activity, because all animals work on magnetism, and they were just like, what the heck was that?
I bet. I love what you said, though, and I'll kind of cap it with the fact that, the word that comes up for me when you were talking is opportunity. And it really is. And I apologize to people who listen, because I feel like I say it all the time, but a lot of times, like, trials are opportunity. And if we change our mindset around those trials, which I've had to do a lot, and I'm still a work in progress, but I've had to do more than probably most know. And I'm still working through a lot of things, and it's not always, puppies and ice cream every single day. I mean, it's life, and there's a lot of stress involved, and people's, when you have a health condition or you have health challenges, I mean, it can be really, really, really heavy, but, mindset, perspective, and also focusing on the blessings are so important. And what I mean by blessings, a podcast episode is a blessing. The ability to look at something on social media is also a blessing. The abundance of information, sometimes as confusing as it is, can be also a blessing. A book can be a blessing. You have a lot of stuff at your fingertips, and so prioritize what you can prioritize. Make it fun and less dreadful. Because again, your cells are going to feel all of that, and your cells are going to respond accordingly, So I love that you brought that up, just about how to change your mindset. Go ahead.
I also want to mention too, financial opportunity, because a lot of people are struggling there. And I think we're in like some of a little recession. It's been my observation the last couple of years. But I've had friends like my friend Kylie with the Flocks thing that have created businesses out of recovering from what they were dealing with. And it could be any condition, psoriasis. Like, I'd love to have a show on acne. If you cured your acne and you have a protocol, come on, and it's, you could have a show, there's a million conditions, so you could share a lot of information on those. But my point is, I think people have made businesses out of their healing a lot. And
Yeah.
you create a website, you have your affiliate links, you
Mhm.
have your own protocol if you want, or an ebook that you sell, virtual content. So that's just another aspect of this, and kind of like a light at the end of the tunnel. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, you spend all this money and time to heal. Now what? Well, it's like now you help other people that are dealing with that.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And for someone who's like, well, that there's no, finances shouldn't matter. Well, a lot of people have to sustain their goal to help people, right? I mean,
yep.
there's like because when you do something full time, like we do, right, you have to
Mhm.
be able to sustain that. So, and again, a lot of times when you have the right heart posture going into it, you're going to get that return eventually. Even if it doesn't
Mhm.
show up right away, I think that you'll get it eventually because things just happen that way.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
here's what I will say. You, first of all, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming on the show. It has been so fun. I'm sad that we have to tie up, but I'm holding you to coming back on. And you have been a very large instrument in my journey as well. And, even with the ups and downs, even with the fact that I wanted to like bang my head against the wall and probably did a couple times because I'm like, what's going on? I've been learning alongside of you. It's been really an honor to see your journey through the last, say, 5 years and where where you've kind of like all of just like I said, the notches on the timeline, and I'm happy to see that you're doing so well, from all aspects, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And, that you're just not going to stop, that you're going to continue. And the fact that you share so much information for free via Mitolife Radio, via social media is just, again, a blessing in and of itself. So thank you. And for people who want to learn more about you or follow you or find you, tell us where they can.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's awesome to be on this journey with you. And I love your show. I need to finish your Andrew Latour Gemba
Oh,
Red Friend show. I love that one. That was a fun show
awesome.
that you
Yeah.
did. So I'm
Thank
working
you.
working my way through that one. So
Thank you.
um yeah, so matt-blackburn.com is kind of the hub where you can find all the stuff. And I need to overhaul that site. It's kind of a old school basic, but I actually have an Amazon store at the bottom, and then I have my recommended products on there, and then my CLF protocol, which I need to update. The last update was 2022, so I need to overhaul that and add some stuff. But I'm trying to keep it simple. And my friend Bob, want to add supplements in, and I could add zinc in there somehow because a lot of things tie in usually to lipofuscin, calcification, and fibrosis. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so many nutrients involved in those. And then mitolife.co is my brand, and it's slowly expanding. It's exciting. So kind of diversifying. I am going to severely cut back the supplement line the next year, just to try to keep it simple, because I do see the overwhelm in people and they're like, where do I start? Do I need all of it?
Mm.
And a lot of people were having fun with it, but uh, just my goal is just to like make it as simple as possible, ideally. But I'm going to keep obviously the basic stuff there. And,
Yeah, of course. Please don't get rid of the E, okay?
yeah, I
Whatever
will
you do,
not. I will
don't get rid of the E. I'm coming after
not.
you.
The 7-stage water filter, that's been
Oh.
labor of love, like 2 years in the making with my friend Austin. Actually, he's talked with him for 2.5 hours the other night on the phone because we're always just chatting about fun possibilities and stuff. And that was truly a labor of love, like to make that filter, which it's the order of operations, so the order of the filtration media that really matters, because people often ask what makes it different from XYZ.
Mhm.
That's a huge one. But just that it's twist off filters. They're actually Idaho made by OmniPure.
Mm.
Um, and I love that filter, and it very effective. If it fits under your kitchen sink, awesome. I mean, you can even put it in your garage by your washer and dryer if you don't have room for it, and tee off
Oh,
your washer. That's something people often don't realize if you really want it and it doesn't fit. But we just came out with a shower filter.
shower
Those
filter. Yeah.
those kind of sold out for a little bit, and then we just got there's like 45 left, and it's a
Oh.
KDF 55, so It's slightly softening the water. It's taking out heavy metals. It's removing almost 100% of chlorine. I think legally I can't say 100%. So it's cutting it back significantly. Yeah.
99.999.
Yeah. 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 Oh, and I will kind of circle back for a second. The water filter actually, and I'm not going to go through every product, but the water filter, we actually have a water quality report, which was really exciting.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
national testing laboratories to show the reduction of everything because people want to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, living tab, we have grounding sheets,
Mm-hmm.
shampoo and conditioner, and then we have coffee. Coffee one's really exciting. Small batch. Currently, we did one out of Brazil, and a lot of it's like fighting the. We're back to fighting the marketing because whether it's air filtration, water filtration, the various forms of supplements all in one, like I was talking about earlier, 7 different forms of magnesium or whatever. There's just so much marketing jargon that I have to like decondition people from and cut through the BS. And with the coffee one, we have the, who with the moldy coffee beans. And it's like mycotoxins and mold. And there's tons of articles. That's more of an issue in the actual machines more than, I mean, if you're buying grocery outlet coffee or Walmart or whatever, I mean,
I
there's
think a lot of
definitely
people are probably buying, unfortunately, I think a
yeah.
lot of people are buying like Folgers.
Yeah. Yeah. There's probably a degree
Yeah.
of that to that.
Yeah.
But when you're getting it like single origin,
Right. Right.
ours from a place in Brazil, Via de Grama, you're getting, single origin, the roast date on there. Mold's not going to be an issue. And so I'm personally drinking this. My brain's still there. I didn't lose it to mold. And I mean,
Well, I'm interested in your coffee. I'm definitely going to try it because I think it's super cool, and in the fact that it's so small, it's small batch, and it's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I have friends in the industry, which is why I did it. So I have a friend,
Ah,
Leon. He's an Armenian friend that started a coffee shop with his dad down in SoCal called Play Coffee. And I think they have 2 locations. I think one's in like Laguna. No, one's in Orange. I can't remember the other one. But they actually use like a whole house filtration unit that injects magnesium in, deionizes the water, pretty much like our Mitolife filter
hmm,
for their coffee, which is just worlds beyond any coffee shop probably in existence.
right, right.
So yeah, I trust his awesome sourcing, and so I was utilizing my connection there. So yeah, those 2 websites, and then
Yeah.
YouTube, obviously.
Well, I will say that yeah, if you guys are not subscribed to Mitolife Radio, I highly suggest that you are. I can't imagine that that I'm sure a lot of people here listening are, but if you're not, and then of course all of the things or all the resources and offerings that Matt has will be in the show notes per usual. You can, always go to the show notes. If you can't find something, of course, you can reach out to either Matt or myself. You're pretty good about DMs too, I have to say. I
Do my
mean,
best.
yeah, I feel like just from what I gauge,
Yeah.
but and also you just share a lot. So he shares a ton on Instagram. That's primarily your main social media, right? Is
Yeah, Matt
Instagram.
Blackburn, and
Mhm.
then Mitolife on there if people want to keep up to date on product restocks and
Yeah.
just information too. I mean, I actually have a scientist friend that I have on staff that helps us with research because I can't do it all myself, especially 20 acres, homestead stuff. It's like I'm not Superman. So I have a really, really smart biochemist friend that he he'll help write for us and stuff. And just basically giving out is the goal is to give out as much free and useful, like I said, actionable information about the products. Make it less about the marketing and more. And then people can go use the information and go buy another brand. I mean, I hope not, but that's if they want to do that, they can. And
Yeah.
just talk about all the different effects that these amino acids and minerals and vitamins have on our body. Tons of posts on the Mitolife page about that. So,
Tons.
yeah.
Yeah. And your Mitolife, your website itself, Mitolife website itself, it's really very descriptive in terms of supplementation. You can really learn a lot in terms of science and then benefits and stuff like that. I mean, just that alone, it's more than most companies put in like when you're talking about like captioning what things are. And yeah, you put a lot of information there, which is really nice and very helpful. Again, you guys, all of this information will be available in the show notes. I just don't know how many more times I could say thank you, but you're just going to have to come back and hang out with me.
Thank you, Vanessa. We can make it a regular thing. Yeah. And I'm sure I'll have more fun stuff. I'm actually, kind of going down a fun prepping, experiential researching. And so, I should do a solo show on my show about it, but, I'll probably have more to share on it. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. No, I have followed you long enough to know that there's never going to be information. You're never going to run out. There's always going to be things to talk about. So I'm going to hold you to it. I can't wait to see you back. I cannot wait to share this. You're just a wealth of information, and I appreciate you both as somebody who's helping others and just as a person. So thank you again for being here. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you too. Thank you, Vanessa. This was so much fun.
Oh, I'm so glad. I had a great time too. All right, Matt, take care, and I will talk to you soon.